Say this real quick. Tom Savage, nobody's writing home about Tom Savage's ability to throw the football either. That would be the guy he would have to beat out. I don't think he can beat out Taysom Hill.
All right, finally, the Steelers drafted Ben Roethlisberger's possible replacement in Mason Rudolph. He'll follow Ben around. Big Ben will probably be expected to do some mentoring. Ben, however, on a slightly different page. He said this, well, that's fine. He can take over someday, but I plan on playing for 3 to 5 more years, depending on how the line goes and staying healthy. If I can stay healthy, if he's going to be their guy, that's great. But in my perfect world, it's not going to be for a long while. CC, what's Ben Roethlisberger's role in Mason Rudolph's development? What does the team expect him to do, and what is he expected to do?
Well, first things first, as a legacy player, not only with the Pittsburgh Steelers, in the Pittsburgh, their organization has done a great job. Their legendary players are some of the best and some of my closest friends in the NFL alumni family. So they do a tremendous job of teaching the younger players of the Pittsburgh Steelers about their tradition, about the NFL. So I think that their expectations would be no different in Ben Roethlisberger. He has taken Pittsburgh and he has maintained the level of this franchise after they took a little bit of a dip. He's been a long-term, he will be one of the greatest players, the second greatest quarterback behind Terry Bradshaw that's ever played for that legendary franchise. Yes, it's his responsibility as a player that any player coming into the league, if he can assist them in helping them career. Now, there's a thin line that you have to be careful as, is he going to replace me? I don't want to get too far ahead and think that Mason Rudolph is the replacement. What about Josh Dobbs, who they drafted last year out of Tennessee? Who told y'all that he ain't going to be a better prospect than Mason just because it was this year's draft? They used a draft pick on Josh last year, so I wouldn't get too into that. Ben, him doing his job day to day will have an impact on this kid. So, yes, there is a certain amount of responsibility, but ultimately the responsibility for as an athlete is on you to get in the classroom, to get with the coaches. It's the coach's job to make sure that that Rudolph is in a good position with the rest of that locker room and specifically that quarterback room.
Listen, Ben Roethlisberger's comments about his lifespan in the NFL seem to go hot and cold year to year.
Yeah.
Within
the season,
within a season they change. Certainly, I don't know if this is going to be my last year. I don't know if I'm going to come back. Now he's talking about playing 3 to 5 more years. I think part of that is about how they acquired Mason Rudolph. We got to keep in mind, I understand this was the round 3 of the draft. People maybe weren't totally locked into the coverage. This is what happened now. They trade Martavis Bryant for the 79th pick of the draft. Mason Rudolph is sitting there at 76. They then trade the pick they used to get, they got from Martavis Bryant and another pick to move up just 3 spots. That's how much they wanted Mason Rudolph, right? They didn't want to run the risk that he goes 76, 77, 78, because they're sitting there at 79. So if I see that, Big Ben sees that. Big Ben sees, okay, it's one thing to draft Josh Dobbs, 135th overall, with our own pick in the 4th round last year. And also Big Ben saw what I didn't see, but whatever the Steelers, I think, saw at practice from Josh Dobbs, which is maybe he isn't the heir apparent. And then he sees them spend a legitimate draft pick with some capital they got from trading a legitimate football player, a guy that works with Big Ben, obviously, in the receiving corps, and says, oh, okay, hold on, Steelers. Yeah, I don't know what you guys are. I'm sticking around. I'm not going anywhere. And that has a ripple effect, whether he's serious or not, on a lot of things. It has a ripple effect on whether or not they want to commit big money to L. Bell. Because they already have the highest paid wide receiver in the league, and Big Ben, if he's going to be there long term, is going to want more money. Go ahead.
Yeah, it would be news to me if an NFL player started understanding whatever the draft capital was and they moved up 2 or 3 spots. Actually, Ben, in this interview, sounded a lot like his exit interview after they lost in the playoffs. He said, I want to play more football. I got a lot of football ahead of me. And then also they hired a new offensive coordinator after getting rid of Todd Haley. So he said, oh, man, I'm feeling rejuvenated. He said the same thing. I don't think Ben and other players in the league, they understand the draft enough to say, wow, they're in the 3rd round. Oh, they're in the 2nd round. Oh, they're going to go down. Ben thinks he's a superstar. He don't think, even if they had drafted Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Ben would tell you today, the dudes ain't going to replace me. His answer would have still been the same. It's going to be a long time before they get in the lineup.
And then quickly, as a coach, you kind of want to hear that from your quarterback, don't you? You want a guy who's got coach, that bravado, and players, fan, teammates.
General manager, teammates, absolutely. Because this is not a business that you can be halfway in and halfway out.
All right. Hey, let's talk a little basketball again. In case you were wondering, let me share with you the San Antonio Spurs to-do list this summer. I was super lucky enough to get a copy of it. I'm just going to go ahead and read exactly what I have. Find Kawhi, talk to Kawhi, ask Kawhi about future plans, see if Kawhi will sign, tell Kawhi you care about his quad injury. Not in that order. That's the list. I'll put it on Twitter. The Spurs are reportedly worried that Kawhi and his group are trying to force a move to either Philadelphia, New York, or either of the LA teams. Nick, how concerned should the Spurs be about Kawhi leaving?
Incredibly concerned. Like this, the Spurs, we give the Spurs franchise and Greg Popovich enormous amounts of credit for the sustained success over the last 30 years. But some of that's been good fortune. Some of that's the good fortune of you win the David Robinson lottery, you win the Tim Duncan lottery, and then savvy drafting on, you see Kawhi Leonard, you trade George Hill, who's now the Cavs point guard, for Kawhi Leonard, that draft pick targeting him, and you develop Kawhi Leonard. To be able to hand the baton from Hall of Famer David Robinson to top 10 player ever Tim Duncan to finals MVP at 23 years old Kawhi Leonard, like that's the perfect plan in this league. That's a superstar-driven league. And now all of a sudden, Kawhi Leonard has the power in the relationship. All he has to say is, whatever contract extension you guys offer me, I'm not signing it. And if he turns down, if they offer him, which I'm not certain will happen, but if they offer him the Supermax extension, and he says, I don't want it, well, then he dictates the terms that he's going to be traded. And if he has his agent tell people, by the way, there's only 4 teams I will sign an extension with, then he dictates the 4 teams the Spurs can negotiate and get any type of return with. Like, so this is, Kawhi Leonard has all the power. I know some fans don't like when the players have the power. I watch sports for players, not for the ownership or the coaches, so I don't mind when the players have the power. Kawhi Leonard has all the power right now, and there's a disconnect. You said his quad injury. The Spurs, are calling this a tendon injury. Kawhi's calling this a quad injury. They can't even get on the same page about what the injury is, which seems to be some of the genesis of the disconnect between the two.
Yeah, I still believe San Antonio have more power than people would be led to believe. They have the most important thing is they have the rights to the player. Second most important thing, they have the power to either offer him the Supermax at $219 million or not to offer him that. All right? No other team can do that. So they do have substantial amount of power. And the third thing they do have is Kawhi and Popovich still do have a relationship. Kawhi would have returned to one of the playoff games had Pop's wife not passed away and Pop was going to coach. All right? They have been in communication since that. So there has been some movement as far as Kawhi and Pop. And that's a huge advantage for San Antonio. But the inability to not get a Supermax contract, people just think that, oh, well, because of his tenure, well, maybe he can go somewhere else and get a Supermax. No, that's not the way the Supermax contract works. And if you sign the Supermax contract, you can't be traded for a year. So to me, there's still tremendous potential in Kawhi signing with San Antonio because of Pop and because of the Supermax. And I don't know people. People talk about it all the time, about what they would do for their job, but I don't know a person that's turned down $80 million.
Oh, well, so that's just real quick, I just want to make sure people understand. The Supermax, which is complicated, you have to qualify for it. You either have to win an MVP or you've got to be first-team All-NBA a couple times. Like, there's different ways you can qualify for it. Your team can give you 5 years, that the rate is now 5 years, $219 million.
Jeez.
In regular free agency, no one else can give him more than 4 years around $140 million. So that's where CC comes up with the $80 million bridge. Even if but that one contract's for, no. It's an $80 million bridge. So that does undercut some of the rationale people have had, which is, well, he wants a better shoe deal. No shoe company's making up $80 million. Not for Kawhi Leonard. Like that's they can make up some of the money, but they're not making up $80 million difference in salary.
I know I'm on an island when I say stuff like this. I wish we could hear something from his team. I know he's from his people, his group, whatever you call it. I know he's a quiet guy and doesn't talk a lot. Not that much is out there. So I just started fishing through last night to see what quotes have been released in the last couple of weeks by anyone from his team or in his group. And it's really been nothing and silent, and I think that turns a lot of fans off in some way. But if he were to leave, of the 4 teams we talked about, Philadelphia, New York, the Clippers, the Lakers, what team do you think Kawhi Leonard would be the perfect fit for?
Well, the 76ers and the Lakers, they have the assets to be able to acquire him. So the Knicks, it's nice to have him on the list. There's people in his group that are in New York City. So people on the Knicks, it's a big market. You think, well, but they don't have the assets, though. So I would take them off the list. As far as the Clippers, someone released that as a place that he would want to go. But to me, if he was in L.A., it would be with the Lakers. And to me, the 76ers, because of draft capital and assets, they could acquire Kawhi Leonard.
Listen, the Spurs, as far as if it was just about who can give you the best return, Boston be on the list. Right? Like, Boston's the team that absolutely can trade the best combination of draft picks and blue-chip prospects. The Lakers can trade a blue-chip prospect in Brandon Ingram, but they don't even have their own draft pick this year. So, like, that's gone. By the way, the team that does have that draft pick is most likely Philadelphia. It's complicated. It could go to Boston, but it'll almost assuredly go to Philadelphia. Like, from a basketball fit standpoint, any of these wings, the reason CeCe said Paul George great fit in Philly, and the reason Kawhi Leonard's a great fit in Philly, is because can you play defense? Can you shoot threes? That's what Philly wants from their wing defenders. That's what they gave
And
Robert.
they want a different style than Ben Simmons.
Right, absolutely. Someone that does not need the ball in their hands. That's why when people say, would LeBron really, as great as LeBron is he a fit in Philly? LeBron and Ben Simmons have some redundancy about them. And so Kawhi Leonard does not. You asked me earlier where I think Paul George, is going. I think that the odds are we're going to have 2 superstars end up in Los Angeles. We know 3 appear to be on the market. Paul George and LeBron via true free agency, Kawhi Leonard via trade. I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of those guys end up in L.A.
Great team. All right, coming up, how will Dez fit in on his next NFL